Welcome back to another episode of Damn Parenting, the podcast for international families navigating parenthood here in the Netherlands. I'm your host Eva, and every week I speak to the professionals you need to hear from so you don't have to figure this out alone. Today's episode is one I think sometimes we need to rehear, or when it's ready to settle with us, when we're able to receive it. Because if you're raising a child in more than one language, and let's be honest, most of us are trying to do exactly that here, chances are you have been treating it as if it's your personal responsibility, your job, your thing to maintain, protect, sustain, every single day. And on top of everything else you're doing. And maybe, quietly or loudly, you've been wondering if you're doing enough. And we're back with our wonderful linguist and multilingual specialist, Mimi, whom, well, we all know. And if not, go ahead and check out all the other episodes we've been doing with her every month since last May when we started season 2. But today, we wanted to talk about how language is not a solo project, and it was never meant to be. Languages live in relationships, in our communities, in the space, well, between people. Not in one very, very tired parent trying harder just to keep their head above the water. Today, we're talking about what it actually means to build a multilingual village and what that looks like when you're here in the Netherlands without your family and best friends nearby, and how to bring other people into your child's language world and the mindset shift that might just take a significant weight off your shoulders. Welcome back to Damn Parenting, Mimi.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, that felt like a bit of a heavy intro, but it is a very important topic that we both have said, like, this is something we really have wanted to talk about, but every episode is equally as important as the next. So I'm glad we're finally here able to do this. I want to start off with something a lot of our parents here in our community are doing quietly. It's where the two parents come from different cultures. Maybe they're the one English-speaking parent in a Dutch household, and they feel completely responsible for keeping that language alive in their child. Is that actually a reasonable thing to put on just one person?
To answer your question directly, no. However, this is something many parents quietly believe. I'm just going to speak my language, and I don't really have much of a support, but that's okay. Often this happens because they don't really have any other choices, or they believe it that they don't have a choice. And very often this goes into a direction of, if I just try harder, if I'm more consistent, if I push more, if I do more, if I somehow make them respond to me in this language. But then again, I need to do more. And then eventually it's going to work. It's not, because you cannot this exclusively on your own. That's the truth. This is my honest answer. Not in a sustainable way. You cannot be a one-person show, no matter how you look at it. Language is not something that can be built in isolation. It's not a solo project. As you said before, languages live in relationships. They live in interaction. They live in community. And this really hit me during a workshop I gave recently. The participants had a lot of questions. We had a really long chat with everybody afterwards. And one of the main takeaways that they mentioned at the end is this: I didn't realize how important community is. And I think this says it all, pretty much sums it up.
So you mentioned there something that I think is very typical. When people are doing workshops, they're usually attending to seek further knowledge to help empower them to be a better parent or to be a better professional. So you said there a lot of them didn't actually realize how important community is. So why do you think that actually surprises people?
Well, let me start a little bit further. At its core, language is about connection. Our brains are primed for language development, for developing fluency in multiple languages. This is a truth, a scientific truth. But we are social animals. So our primary goal is connection, is communication. And language, it's one of our tools to fulfill those goals. So we use language to connect. Children develop language to connect with other people. And language is not just vocabulary or grammar. It's relationships, it's shared experiences, it's all those inside jokes that you have with the people you speak with, emotional expression, and so on and so on. So when a child only uses a language with one person, that language can start to feel limited. Like it's, in a family setting, and a mom or a dad is trying to pass on a language and they're the only speaker in the child's life. Eventually, with time, it can and most probably will start to feel like something that this parent is imposing on them. Like, mom and dad want me to do this. I don't know why I'm doing it, but they want me to do. And this is too much pressure. There is not as much meaning in this, especially as the child grows older and they come into their own personality and they start to explore and have a bigger social circle and more interests. And whatever mom is making me do doesn't always align with their interests, if ever. Children start to see, as I said, when they have a community or other people to speak the language with, they start to understand slowly, okay, this language is not just something that I speak with mom or I speak with dad, or it's just truly something that I can use with other people as well. You know, I can use it when I go visit grandma and grandpa. I can use it when I go visit my uncles, my cousins, my friends. And that's when a language really starts to stick, when there is a community, because the social aspect of language development is huge. And for children, this is really especially true.
I love the idea of the multilingual village because a lot of people already know it takes a village. And we did have it as one of the very first episodes with Dr. Naomi Gibson about having a village as a parent. But what you're bringing here is the multilingual village. But for a lot of our listeners who are in the Netherlands without any family nearby, without any obvious community, what does this actually look like? Because I don't want to feel like one more impossible thing really to add on to that list.
Well, let me start with this. It doesn't have to be anything grand, anything complicated, anything crazy or big. It's a multilingual village is simply a network of people and opportunities where your child can experience the language, manage the language, develop their language, just try out different things. And they have the opportunity to speak the language in a setting that is interesting for them. Enrichment, basically, for their language development. And the multilingual village can include grandparents, extended family, even if they're not close by, like a lot of us have lack of them close by, over video chat, cousins, babysitters, playgroups, different sorts of community events, trips to places where the language is spoken, mom or dad groups with people who speak this language, all things like this. So any sort of language exposure and people who provide authentic language exposure for your children can be considered part of your multilingual village. It comes down to the fact of thinking about who else can be a part of this language journey, who else can support my child, provide exposure, and so on. Because again, you can't do this alone in the long run.
So this is where I think it's going to get real for any listener here, especially for myself. What if you're someone with a minority language, as it would be, that isn't widely represented here at all? What if you don't have a community that already exists? So you mentioned there like grandparents. What if the grandparents, they mightn't be around anymore? What if the cousins are very different ages or there are no cousins? What if we can't find the babysitters who speak our language? What if there are no playgroups in our language, especially where we're living? Because in Amsterdam, yes, you'll have quite a lot of variety, but in other places around the Netherlands, we don't have that support always. So what if we don't have a ready-made community?
You have to be intentional about how you approach this. And as I said before, it doesn't have to be anything grand or anything big. If you don't have a play group, maybe you can consider starting one, and you can consider looking for people, be it on social media or other people who speak the same language and are struggling with similar issues. Attending different kinds of events, this is also helpful because then you meet people and you can be proactive and ask people, perhaps even organizing meetups yourself. Sometimes it's about making conscious choices because, I know people who have moved locations. I'm not saying this is what people should do, by no means. I'm just saying people have different ways of coping with it and of being intentional because, again, different people do different things and are ready to do different things. Definitely supporting a minority language requires prioritization. Let me give you a personal example. I don't really have a very big Bulgarian community in Amsterdam. I live just outside of Amsterdam. I don't know anybody in the area, just one friend. So I've been looking for different ways to connect with the community. We have the Heritage Language School in Amsterdam. There are some friendships there. There is a big Bulgarian community in Eindhoven. So when we see that there are events, we take the trip of an hour and a half plus and go there for the day, and we turn it into a day event. But it means something and it's important. So we consciously decide to do this. Those are things that, as I said before, not everybody is open to doing everything and anything. So you need to be clear how far you're willing to go, how much you're willing to do, and you need to be intentional about creating a community.
And you mentioned there's something about outsourcing language support. I kind of want to dig in because I think when parents hear that, they will immediately think that must require money or perfect circumstances. So can you actually talk about what does it mean practically speaking?
Well, outsourcing language support is a really useful strategy, and it doesn't have to be complicated. Again, we don't have to make things complicated. You can just bring a language partner. This is what I mean. And a language partner is somebody who can help you support a particular language. For example, a babysitter or a teenager who speaks this language. If there is, for example, you don't know anybody who lives close by, but maybe you can reach to the Heritage Language School or to a language school and you can see, oh, who's attending. Maybe those families have older children who are interested in doing some babysitting. And when I say a teenager to come and play or babysit, you don't need to go away, but you can be in the other room doing something and your child can play with this person. And they will be another resource for language exposure for them, playing with them, reading with them, just having another source of language input. Somebody who spends time with your child in this language, basically. And this really works well because children love interacting with other children, or especially slightly older peers. They get their full attention, and there's something very special about this dynamic. So again, this is something we need to be intentional about. And when you have somebody like this that you can outsource your language, even if it's a teenager, a babysitter, if it's a friend, a neighbor who speaks this language, it's always great to explain why you want them to support you on this journey, why you need their support, what their job is, so to say. And if possible at all, don't let your child know that this person speaks other languages. Because if your child is, for example, struggling a little bit, they will default, let's say, to Dutch in our case, and then they'll continue speaking Dutch. And the idea is to practice the target language. So let them know why they're there, what you need from them, and tell them how to do it. If they struggle to come up with ideas, give them some books, some toys, some games, or some activity ideas, and let them spend time, even if it's just going outside to the playground together. Again, it doesn't have to be anything complicated, but it's the interaction and it's the time spent together doing something and playing.
And can you tell me, what is it actually about having multiple people that changes the child's actual relationship with the language?
It's extremely useful and needed when a child experiences languages with different people. Because as I said before, it stops being just the parent language or the caregiver language or whatever mom, dad, or whoever is making me do. And it slowly starts to become their language. And this is one of my personal definitions of success, to have the language become my child's language so they can mold it and do with it what they want and how they want it. Because when a child only uses a language with one person, and we're talking about the parent or caregiver, I mentioned before, it can and will with time start to feel limited, almost like it belongs only to this relationship and within this dynamic rather than to them. But when the same language shows up in different interactions, let's say with grandparents, with babysitters, friends, community, even exchange students at some point, or do whatever works, it takes on a very different role. Multiple roles, and it becomes more flexible, more relevant for them, and they can learn to be themselves and experiment with this language more. And one of the most important things, it becomes more meaningful and needed, because when they feel like there is a need for the language, they will speak it. Otherwise, If they don't see a need, they won't make the effort. And it creates an opportunity also for real communication because people bring different energies, different topics, different ways of interacting. And it pushes the child, again, to communicate in different ways and make the language their own.
You actually remind me of a conversation we had last year at some stage where we were talking that if your child's with their grandmother of whatever nationality, if the grandmother is talking to the child and if the child really wants that ice cream, the child's going to have to be able to speak that language with the grandmother, be able to say, yes, I would like an ice cream. And so there's a certain context and drive that really can help push the child. So I guess that's in existence there.
That's a very serious meaning and need there for the child, isn't there? It's
ice cream.
Absolutely. It's super important and it's relevant for their world.
So if you could give parents one mindset shift, like one thing that they could actually think about differently, I guess, when it comes to their children's multilingualism or bilingualism, what would it be?
You cannot be a one-person show. You're not the sole carrier of the language, and you're not supposed to be, because if it only depends on you, the system will become fragile with time. It will not be sustainable because life doesn't stop when you have to develop your children's languages. You get tired, you get stressed, routines change, and so on and so on. But when a language is supported by a village, it becomes much more resilient, much more sustainable, much more needed and meaningful. It has multiple entry points into your child's life. And this is something that it's super important.
And with this, is there anything you think out of all of this, is there one thing you want really parents to be sure to take away from this?
Multilingual parenting or parenting multilingual children is not about doing more on your own. It's not about piling more and more and more and then hoping that it's going to yield results eventually. It's one very important aspect of it is about bringing others in. Because as we said at the very beginning, language doesn't grow in isolation. Language grows and lives in relationships.
Well, thank you, Mimi, again for joining us. And we give these episodes very short periods of time because it's quite impactful and we want you to be able to sit with this. And we don't want something long and drawn out because then there's too much words, there's too much ideas. And so that's why we like to make these shorter episodes for you to be able to have a takeaway. So what I'm thinking about after this conversation is the phrase that she used is, you are just one part of the puzzle. And because I think so many of us have arrived here in the quiet disbelief that our minority languages are our responsibility to carry. And I mean, not just carry, but carry perfectly, because we always try to be the perfect parent and consistently. And every single day, even when we're tired, even when the child is pushing back, even when it feels like we are the only ones who actually care about this. I guess what Mimi is giving me today, and I hope she's given it to you today, is permission. Permission to look around and ask, who else can help me here? Who else could be part of this? And it's nothing to do with failing. It's because it's exactly how language is supposed to work. Mimi is available every single month on this podcast because language, as an international parent here in the Netherlands, is goddamn hard. I'm still struggling to find my Irish community for my daughter, but it really takes a village. And that village is not just about parenting, motherhood, but it's also about language. If this episode resonated, the single most helpful thing you can do for this podcast is to share it with one person who needs it. It's just one DM, that's it. That's how international parents in the Netherlands can find each other. Head on over to Instagram if you're there. Make sure you share. Click on the share, not just the like, but the share, and send it to someone who might need this as well. We all deserve a little help.